Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of Southwark's Cabinet. Can I remind you, please, if you have a mobile phone, please switch it to silent. If you come up to the microphones, please keep any electronic device away from microphones. It does interfere with the sound system. Filming and recording are permitted at our council meetings, and we always ask for any filming to be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb proceedings. There is a live feed on, is it on our Facebook page? Where is it, Everton? YouTube, yeah, great. Okay. I don't watch it, I'm here. Any apologies? Everyone's here, aren't they?
Kieran for lateness.
Oh, Kieran for lateness, okay. There are urgent items, item 7, deputation requests, and item 18, impact of Brexit. What is that? On Southwark progress report, which is on supplemental agenda number 2. There is a closed session business, namely item 20, Styles House and Southwark Underground Station, enabling principals to facilitate new council homes and new employment space, and no representations have been received about taking that in a closed session. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or dispensations that anyone needs to make? Public question time is item 5, but we've received none. So can we agree the minutes of our meeting, which were held on the 12th of March, which are pages 2 to 10 of the main agenda? Agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we've got 3 deputations this afternoon. Be Active Social Enterprise, Styles House TMO, and Plastic Free Peckham. So I'll invite, first of all, Be Active Social Enterprise and Umran Ali and Tom to come forward. Good to see you. So you know the form. You've got 5 minutes to address us, and then we can ask any questions. Over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for seeing us today. This is by way of a follow-up to our 2017 petition, so I hope you had a little bit of a chance to glance at that. When I did the notes for this presentation this afternoon, it actually took 15 minutes, so this is going to be the expedited version, you'll be pleased to know. But if I do jump over and there's any background, please ask us questions at the end. So I was just going to introduce ourselves and then talk about why we're here, what we're asking for and why. So I'm Tom Ulichark, and with Umran Ali we created a community interest company back in 2011, and we've been running the tennis centre at Burgess Park ever since. We run these on short-term leases from the council and work with the charity Southwark City Tennis Club as well as other groups in the park to deliver community sports. When we took over the tennis centre back in 2011, it was previously run by the council, and because of the austerity measures this was proving difficult, so that was the background to us taking over. The annual turnover when we took over was £5,500. So jumping forward to the last financial year, the financial situation, we've generated a turnover of 160,000 with 125 from commercial activities. So this is clearly a big improvement, but it's still below the level that we think the site should be generating, and to allow a significant investment in the tennis programme and facilities going forward. Because we know from the sports strategy there's a big need and a growing need in the area, and we would like the tennis centre at Burgess Park to expand and to contribute to meeting the objectives of the sports and physical activity strategy. So as an organisation we feel we're very transparent. You can see mine and Umran's salary on Companies House, and we also publish our expenditures for the year there as well, not just the balance sheet. So with our sort of current turnover, we're able to deliver 34 hours of group classes a week for children, with over 200 children participating, and this is at fee rates less than half of the average price for the other venues in Southwark. Umran delivers 5 hours of one-to-one sessions with some of the performance players that are representing at national, regional and even international levels now. We do 10 hours of group coaching a week for adults, We run 10 holiday camps throughout the year. We support 9 league teams, ladders competitions and events for adults as well as children. And as part of the green flag process, we keep the toilets open 362 days a year. So we think we've sort of a very strong position of providing value to the local community. We would ask Cabinet to reflect whether a commercial firm would have undertaken these sort of activities on the same short-term leases and would be able to deliver what we're delivering within the resources we have even now. So jumping forward to what we're requesting today and why we're requesting this. So in 2017 we presented a petition for a long-term plan for tennis in Southwark. At the heart of this was a need for a long-term lease at Burgess Park. This is the only dedicated public tennis venue in the borough. If we don't have a community programme here, then Southwark won't have a community programme, full stop. A partnership really needs to deliver on a common goal, and for tennis, this is articulated in the Council's own 2015 Burgess Park Master Plan, which identified the need to include 4 more floodlit courts and to upgrade the pavilion at the venue. Out of the 7 million sports budget for Burgess Park, only 106,000 went to tennis, and this was for resurfacing rather than improvements. So we fully understand the resource constraints faced by the Council, but this only makes the need to agree a long-term lease more urgent to allow us to secure the necessary external financing to add to our own resources. We have a good track record in doing this, and the Marlborough Sports Garden is perhaps a good recent example of the Council adopting such an approach for a sports venue. So overall, given the sort of elapsed time, the long time that we've been there on short-term measures, the relatively small scale of tennis operations, our sort of track record, and the clear shared objective we have with the Council to improve the site at Burgess Park, we would ask that the Cabinet moves ahead with the long-term tennis plan, as well as a lease for Burgess Park, with a view to getting this in place by the end of our current lease this December. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think bang on 5 minutes. Great. Any questions for the deputation? Rebecca, do you want to say anything in response? Okay. Well, in the absence of questions, I'll hand it over to Rebecca to respond.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Imran. Thank you, Tom. I know that with your petition back in 2017, you asked us to develop a long-term strategy for tennis, and obviously what we've got later today on our Cabinet agenda is our sport and physical activity strategy, which we've been working on since the time when we last went out to procurement and were unable to secure any procurement back after your petition in 2017. And what we're hoping to do today is, so long as this strategy is approved, what we are then looking to do is exactly as you're asking. We will then look to develop a long-term strategy for tennis, looking across the whole of the borough, to make sure that we've got that in place by January 2020, so that it aligns with the end of your contract at the end of 2019. But of course, what we want to do is make sure that we're working with you, so we're not going to develop that strategy in isolation, and we'll work with you and with any other partners that you think should be around the table as well as part of the development of that strategy, so that we can make sure it really reflects the priorities that we have for tennis across the borough as well.
So I think that's kind of quite positive in that it's not negative.
Do all of the things they want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately they want a long lease, but I mean that could be part of the strategy that you're discussing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Brian, good to see you both. Thanks for coming in. Thank you. Okay, our next application is Styles House Tenant Management Organisation. Zoe and Philippe, are you here? Okay, Zoe, do introduce the team, and then you've got 5 minutes, and what we know,
That one? So I'm Zoe Kennedy, I'm a resident at Styles House. This is Philippe, who's a resident, Cassie is a resident, and Barb is a resident. And we have some residents in the back as well, but we didn't have enough chairs. So we're coming to talk to you today about a proposal to do regeneration at Styles House, which will include a land swap with TfL. You'll be discussing it later. And this has come about following quite a lot of hard work with residents and quite a lot of trust with those involved, which has actually been quite hard for us to get over some of the earlier problems. For those who don't know, and I'm sure you probably do, Styles House is a TMO, so we self-manage. And as a TMO, we haven't taken a stance on this position, but we have consulted with residents, and there is broad support for progressing a scheme, or at least examining a scheme and seeing if we can develop something is probably the way to put this. But there is a lot of understandable concerns from residents. And we've come here today because we think there's some points which are important to make as part of your discussion. So this is a complex regeneration scheme. We wouldn't have spent 20 years actually discussing it with the council if it was a straightforward regeneration scheme. And I know no regeneration scheme is straightforward, but ours does seem particularly complex. So all estates are unique, and I think carrying out regeneration requires an acceptance of that and working with that uniqueness and recognising it and trying to come up with a scheme that works for the people who live there. It also requires flexibility, and I think if this scheme is going to come to fruition, this means that the council has to be quite flexible in the approach that it takes, and I think this is a particularly important thing that we'd like to emphasise. So this includes allowing the TMO to lead the scheme, and we'll either argue amongst ourselves or we'll argue with you. That's your two choices, and it's probably better if we argue amongst ourselves. Normally the RSO, the resident service officer, would be involved in the decant. At the TMO, it means the TMO would be doing that, and we'll probably come to you for some money for that. I just want to get that in early. It needs flexibility. Applying the rules rigidly means that we're not going to achieve what we need to achieve, and I think the great thing about TMOs is that we can get into the weeds, we can really understand what residents want, but that also means that we need to have some flexibility to meet those needs, or else the scheme isn't going to progress, and that's what we particularly want, is the flexibility to move outside of the normal rigid rules. This may include decanting residents from the block during the works, and I think it's important the council is flexible and actually trusts the TMO as a partner, because actually if we're a partner, that means that we have to be able to take some decisions, and you trust the approach that we take. And I'm reflecting this as the comments we've had from residents. The scheme will involve a lot of negatives for residents, and I think that's probably true of building any council housing, that if you're building on a current estate, there's a lot of negatives. For us, it's more complex because it also involves building on top of a tube station, which also gives us a lot of negatives. And we can't get away from that. We have to find a way to mitigate this, and some money will be required to be spent to offset this impact, and this is something we've been discussing with Councillor Pollock. And I think we need to be part of the discussions with TfL, and TfL won't like that. I don't think the council will like that. But if it's going to happen, that involves including the TMO and the residents as a partner, which is part of what's been the challenge so far. And we just want to emphasise that treating people as a partner is treating them as an equal. So, and one of those things is being able to say no, which is, I think, always one of the challenges. A particular concern for residents is things like property sizes and, you know, the height of buildings, etc., etc. And that might mean that we don't always follow planning guidelines, and it's just something we want to bring up, because we think that if we're going to be able to achieve a scheme which gets us some council housing and also mitigates some of the impact, we're going to have to not always follow planning guidelines. And I think it's important that this flexibility is acknowledged, because not just for councils but officers will have to move outside some of the normal approach, and actually that we need officers to accept that and be supported by councils in that. So I think that the things that we particularly want to bring up is that this should be resident led. It can be messy to do schemes which are resident led, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. That actually we can achieve a lot more by getting residents to lead it. Residents need to have oversight and be treated as partners. The council must be flexible around decants and around sizes and everything. I don't want to go into a lot of details, but there needs to be that flexibility, and we need to accept that. Where's my last page? Yes, and we need to accept that some money will need to be spent. It can't all be on new council housing. It also needs to be spent on current residents, because actually we need to mitigate some of that impact. Do you want to go? No?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, lots of questions. I'll start over here. Vicky, Richard, Johnson, Steph, and then Leo to respond.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful. Just to help us, because we're, the plan is that we take a decision on the report today. As I understand it, the report sets out kind of the basis for the land swap with TfL, and it does set out some details of kind of how we will kind of consult and work with residents. Is there anything additional specific that it would be helpful for us to add to the report today, so that we do our best to take account of what you're raising? Is there something obvious missing from what we're planning to do?
I think that for us the most important thing is that there's a clear acknowledgement that this should be resident-led and that residents are equal partners, which I think is in there. I feel it could be stronger, and the actually working as partners with residents does mean actually giving us the power to say no, accepting that might be a bit messy. So something in there that acknowledges that and acknowledges us as equal partners, because until now it hasn't really felt that way. So I think that's what we're looking for.
But just on you saying no, in principle, you are, I know you're trying not to take a position, but it broadly sounds like residents are happy with the proposals going ahead, and that there will be kind of new homes and development here.
Shall I go? Yeah. I think it's probably worth being specific. What residents are happy to do is start examining the design of new homes. It's not necessarily that residents have accepted that new homes should happen, and in fact some people are really quite strongly against that, and what we're trying to do as a TMO is balance that. For example, I live on the side of the block which will be most affected. I'm not super keen on this scheme, but I accept that it should be a democratic decision of people. New homes, I'm in favour of new council housing, and so I think it would be wrong to say that we're broadly accepting it. I think we're accepting doing some further work to see if we can come up with a scheme. There is no scheme at the moment, so we need to design a scheme, and that needs to be led by us. We also acknowledge that by doing a scheme, this allows TfL to build, and without doing a scheme, it's highly unlikely TfL will ever be able to build on top of the tube station, or if they do, it will be quite small. That's the reality, and so we have to balance that. And I think this issue, I think if residents feel powerless, they won't want to progress the scheme because they'll feel powerless, and therefore they won't even want to start. I think what Councillor Pollock has done is allow us to have more say and have more power, which has made us confident to go forward. And if that's not acknowledged in the report, then actually people won't want to progress it. They'll progress it on the basis that we will have some form of veto, or I don't know what a good word is, but oversight. And I'm aware that there's a wording problem here, but I think it's an acknowledgement by the council, by councillors and by council officers, but by the cabinet, that actually, as equal partners, if it was your house, you'd get to say no, this is our homes, and actually we have to, if we're going to be confident to carry on, there has to be something there that makes us feel confident. The council isn't going to come along and try to bash us with a scheme.
Okay, that sort of answers one of my questions, which is what you meant by resident-led, because I think for me there's a challenge there, that if you're saying that you don't know what you want the outcome to be, it's difficult to have a clear idea about how you lead to there. But I think what you said is actually what you want to do is make sure that the TMO is properly, fully engaged in the process, and whilst it might be the council that is generating the ideas, what you want to make sure is that full discussion about ideas and a way of coming to an agreement about those ideas. Is that a fair way of explaining it?
I think I will come back on that.
I'll clarify on that one.
Okay, all right, Mark.
Because I think that it's probably not right to say the council has been coming forward with the ideas, and which is not an attack on the council, but actually this is very much, it has been working with residents. We're the ones who have the ideas, and we are a TMO, and we can deliver this scheme, and actually it won't be the council delivering the scheme, it will be the TMO delivering the scheme. And for example, if we look at Leathermarket, they delivered the scheme because they owned the land, in the sense they delivered their own scheme. Ultimately, if we're going to deliver a scheme, we have to develop a scheme. When I say we're either shouting at you or shouting at each other, I may be joking, but actually if we're going to deliver a scheme, it has to be something that we come up with as residents, not something the council imposes on us, which at the moment the council isn't trying to impose something on us. But actually, if we're going to make this happen, we as residents have to lead it. We as a TMO have to be the ones that own this.
Leo's making sort of various noises and hand signals at me, that's fine. Okay, that all sounds good. I guess the one question then was, you talked a bit about decanting and plans for decanting, and as I understand it, that this is likely to affect 6 of the homes at Styles House in the sort of chalet kind of blocks at the side, the lower rise blocks, rather than in the tower. So presumably it's 6 households which need to be decanted. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about what it was that you were trying to achieve with that.
So it's actually 8 flats in the studio. No, it's fine. But we're aware there's going to be a particular impact on people in the block. And something that residents have brought up with us, and so that's why we feel that they need to raise it, is that it may be the decanting needs to be slightly wider than just the people in the studio flats. We don't know what that looks like. This is very early stage. We want to get it down as a principle. It may never happen, but we want it to be there so that we're aware that's something in our back pocket, so that when we're developing the scheme, that might be the case that the person on the ground floor is going to be particularly affected, you know, and it fits with their housing needs. We may need to decant them. There's nothing at the moment, there's no plan for that. It's just something we'd like to get across as a principle, which is why we need the flexibility. We need to be willing to move slightly outside possibly what would normally be done in a regeneration scheme.
Want to recognise the work of the TMO, party to some of the earlier discussions, and Council Parliament has done a sterling job in terms of continuing the discussion with TMO, but wanting to recognise all of the work you've done in getting it this far. You talked about how you ensure any potential schemes that come forward are working with residents. Just wanted to explore that a little bit further. Have you had the opportunity to visit examples right across the borough and with the council's works with local residents, and just want to explore that further in terms of what learnings you took from those visits and takeaways from those visits?
We have done some, particularly at Leathermarket, and I think what is clear to us is that it is the issue that we keep bringing up, which is empowerment, which is that residents have to feel empowered as part of this, and if it's done to them, it's going to feel very different. And it's very clear to us that there's a lot of opposition in the block. It's not necessarily people saying no, but they've got a lot of concerns, and if they're not empowered, then actually we're just going to get opposition. And I'm not kidding when I say it's been 20 years. The first regeneration scheme was in 1999, and actually residents have lived through 20 years of planned regeneration, which have never happened. And if we're going to make this happen, and there's lots of positives to why it should, we recognise it's not just ex-council housing, it's also building on top of the tube station, which is jobs, and you know there's a lot there. But actually, part of that is mitigating the impact on residents, because as a resident, there's very little that people are going to get, because actually all they're going to get is a lot of buildings surrounding them, and a lot of noise, and actually we have to recognise that. And that's what we got from talking to people, is that some people feel it's done to them, and some people felt that they controlled the process, and so we've taken that and we think there has to be some control.
Can I just add as well that in the, because TfL are involved in this, and because it's a land swap, it's probably slightly more complicated than some of the, so the Leathermarket scheme, for example, as far as I know, was the garages, that they were council-owned garages that went, and I think that is what's led to some quite protracted discussion over the years, and understandable nervousness actually on the part of the residents about how much influence TfL will have and how much control they will have over essentially what is happening on the council side of it and the residents' side of the land. So I think that makes it very slightly different from the usual kind of estate regeneration schemes that we've done.
Thanks again for coming, and obviously, like Johnson, I've been involved in this beforehand in previous sort of iterations. Obviously, I do see some progress in this, but I understand all your concerns. I suppose my question really, Richard did touch on it around the decant, and obviously decant sort of comes more onto housing management. Are you saying that you want to sort of totally look at decant? Because sometimes what we find is that for some people there are very complex issues, so you have to have other departments like adult care involved within the adaptations, and sometimes it's not as straightforward as it is. So are you sort of saying that you want to do it on your own, or you want to do it in sort of collaboration with the council? Because there may be some people that it's really, really hard to find those. And the other thing is we do actually look at quite bespoke issues. I think So Gardens is a really good example of that, with Florian Racine, where we had 2 blocks with 1 bedrooms with very elderly people, and what we looked at was how could we sort of, in terms of their banding, sort of ring fence in the immediate area, any 1 bedroom flats that came up, that they would have priority bidding over that. So there are things we can do. So I'd say in terms of the decant, obviously had that conversation around that, and maybe, I get what you're saying about wanting to be part of it, but maybe in some issues there needs to be some collaboration and working together.
Yeah, I don't think we imagine we'd be doing it all by ourselves. You have to work with other services and with the housing options team. And yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's more that we think it's important that the TMO leads this, as happened at Leathermarket, rather than the council leads this, because we're aware of people's needs. And I think the issue around the decant's a good one, because actually I think the council will see this as they have to decant 8 people in the studios. The way we see this, we may have to decant more people, because we're aware of the impact, and you know, we're aware of their individual needs, of the people who are in those as well. Maybe quite elderly, would have been thinking of moving anyway, for example. And so we're very aware of people's needs, and that's why we should lead it, but there's no sense in which we wouldn't do it with the council. Clearly, we would have to get. Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
Okay, and Leah,
just to ask about the TfL's development, I know that's changing and isn't final designs yet, but do you feel like it's moving in the right direction? I think they've moved it back from the estate a bit and changed some of the height. Do you feel like that's moving the right way? I'm sure you want to make sure the final designs are right, but interested in your views.
I think it's probably fair to say we're glad it's moved back, and that's a good compromise. Not sure we'll ever be happy, but hey, you can't achieve happiness. I think our big concern is that we don't know what TfL is going to build. All their plans so far have been ginormous buildings shaped like a big boot, like an L shape, you know, it's not great. TfL don't appear to have any plans to consult with us beyond the normal planning process. I think that's where this scheme is likely to be at its weakest and most likely to fail, is that TfL will just try to do their normal. They don't seem very good at consultation, and having dealt with them on other issues, that's very clear to me they're not very good at consultation. I was very keen to have a master plan for the area, which I don't think TfL is very keen on, because of course they want to open a second entrance, which has seen strong opposition. So I think it's hard for us to say, because we don't yet know what TfL are going to want to build, and they're not really being very open, and they're not really talking to us about it. So it may well be that we come up with a scheme, and TfL's scheme is just horrendous, and we hate it, and everybody locally hates it, and there's, you know, I think it's impossible to say, or maybe they will listen and they'll come up with something which isn't too awful. I mean, you know, it's a modern building, it's going to be ugly, we accept that. But, you know, maybe it's not too bad. So I think one of our concerns is that by doing our scheme, it allows TfL to build, and we have no control over that process, and we don't know what they're going to come out with. I think that's, yeah.
Okay, and Leo.
Yeah, I guess there's lots to respond to here.
Not too much.
Not too much. Thank you, first and foremost. It's been a long journey to get to this point, but you know, the amount of work you put in helping me to negotiate with TfL to change the parameters completely, have a radically different starting point, has been really, you know, I have to acknowledge it up front. I do want to actually sort of kind of respond a little bit to some of my colleagues' questions. This is a resident-led development, so far as I'm concerned, and it's a TMO-led development for the purposes of delivering council homes that will be managed by the TMO. And when we say council homes, we mean homes that are lifetime tenancies, council social target formula rents, with that kind of collaboration with the council on council land, etc. So with grant as well attached to it, and all of the kind of different stipulations that we normally associate with that. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. The point on flexibility, I hear you entirely, and I think you'll see on paragraph 31 there's many points where huge amounts of flexibility have already been locked into the starting point for this, and crucially for the process. When we talk about that critical oversight and sign-off function for the TMO, we mean it. It's your set of workshops, it's your work that you'll be doing with Bell Phillips and Development Manager to come up with these designs. I should acknowledge as well that something we talked about beforehand, the estate improvement plan approach, which is all about just thinking beyond the narrow red line of the development plot, absolutely applies here and absolutely does apply to what TfL would fund here, and we're happy to get that acknowledgement in a letter over to you, as well as the different points that have shaped this sort of starting point. On the point of decants as well, kind of echo everything Steph has said. This will apply also to how the new homes are allocated as well. So they would, of course, have first dibs for residents on Star's house, and there would be, I think, a great amount of discretion that you can exercise in those design workshops to make sure that those homes meet the specific needs of residents who would need it. And I think there's a great opportunity there to take advantage of. The other thing I just want to say about TfL, they're not in the room actually, but I would say that they have shown real willing to make several very major concessions to get the ball rolling on this, and there is a point in the whole process where there will be joint master planning between yourselves and TfL to make sure that all of those buffer issues, the shared spaces, the enclosed space particularly, I remember Philippe, you calling for that very strongly. It's there, it's written down in black and white, it's here in the report. That is the starting point that we're driving at. But I will say that for the consultation for I had a meeting with them yesterday, and that will begin in earnest around June time, and I'm pretty confident that they have very much learnt the lessons of consultations that they've attempted in previous years. I think it's going to be a lot better than it has been before, and they will of course be wanting to meet with you very regularly and start to build up that long-term partnership. I'm confident we can do it. There's a good starting point here. I can't wait to see what comes out of the workshops.
Thank you very much indeed, Leo. And I suppose the only thing to think about is whether there's any beating up of the wording in the recommendations to put the TMO-led process at the heart of things. I mean, it's kind of referenced in there because it references 32 and 33, which are just double-checking, which talks about the influence that you will have had and will continue to have. So it's kind of in there implicitly, and I wonder whether we just draw out a line to make it more explicit, because I think that might give you some reassurance then to go back to fellow residents and say, look, they've listened again, and this is where
I just would be, I've been as explicit as I can be in the foreword that you are equal partners in this. It's the TMO and TfL doing their thing on this shared site. It's complex, but the council's the key breaker in between.
Okay, well let's think about how we
yeah. Sure.
Yeah, let's see if we can draw it down. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Okay, and then finally, plastic-free Peckham, Laura and Giles, which references our single-use plastics policy. I think that which is item 14.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Thank you for having us again. Yeah, this is Laura, I'm Giles. Some of you have met us before, a few weeks ago. Laura's going to start. We're just going to say thanks again for having us. Some of the things we're going to say you may have heard from us before, but I think it's important we repeat them, reiterate them, and hopefully come away with some positive outcomes. 5 minutes, here we go.
So the global plastic crisis is well documented in the press now, so I'm just going to give you a couple of facts for context. Since the beginning of the mass production of plastic, humans have produced approximately 8.3 billion tonnes of it. 9% of that has been recycled and 12% incinerated. That leaves 6.3 billion tonnes of plastic on the earth in landfill or the natural environment. At current rates, the amount of plastic on the earth will double in the next decade. I would ask that you think about the 9% likelihood of your plastic packaging being recycled next time you buy a bag of pasta, a ready meal, or a takeaway sandwich. The reasons for this are various. Plastic is an enormously useful and durable material. Recycling is not easy with poor labelling on products and general confusion about what can and can't be recycled. It's also irresponsible of plastic producers to expect the end consumer to recycle this waste when it's not actually possible to deal sensibly with the amount we produce. We're currently incapable of cleaning up our own mess. There are currently 5 islands of plastic in the oceans around the world. These huge concentrations of plastic debris cover large swathes of the ocean. The one between California and Hawaii is the size of the state of Texas. As my colleague Rick from Plastic Free East Dulwich pointed out last time we spoke, plastic has now entered our food chain and is thought to be in the stomachs of 1 in every 4 fish. We are poisoning ourselves.
So, over to me. So, we are Plastic Free Peckham. We are part of Surfers Against Sewage, who are a marine conservation charity working nationally with the mindset of protecting our oceans, waves, beaches, and all the marine life that live within them. Laura and I are one of a small team of very hard-working, for free volunteers based in Peckham. We have one single-minded, community-focused initiative, and that is to reduce single-use plastic items from our daily lives. We are one of around 500 plastic-free communities in the UK. There are 33 plastic-free communities across London, and to date we are one of 2, including Plastic-Free East Dulwich, plastic-free communities in Southwark. The numbers are growing as we speak. What are we doing? We are talking to local businesses, schools and groups. We're working with them to help them reduce and hopefully in time eradicate the amount of single-use plastic items from their daily function, always with the mantra of reduce, reuse and recycle. In 5 months we've been active. We had our first meeting in November last year. We've engaged half a dozen schools, we've presented to schools. It's absolutely incredible how much the children already know. We've been speaking to many businesses, specifically in the sort of the Bellenden Road, Peckham area, but we've engaged about 25 local independent businesses. We've already got several plaques in shop windows. They've achieved their plastic-free status. That means they've eradicated 3 single-use plastic items from their daily function. We have made great steps. We're currently working with the Bellenden Big Taster, raising money for refugees. This is happening this Thursday evening. We've got our first community clean-up in Peckham Right on the 11 AM Saturday 12th of May. You're more than welcome to come. More than welcome to come, help us pick up plastic, rubbish. East Dulwich had their first community clean-up 6 weeks ago, and they had about 22 big sacks of plastic gathered from around the area.
In an hour and a half.
In an hour and a half, so that just kind of points the finger. So look, what can you do? We'd love you to be more responsible. You already are, but be more responsible for the residents. So we're not just talking humans, we're talking animals, the wildlife, the rivers, the parks, etc. You're already doing things such as introducing water fountains in parks, which is great. That will help reduce, hopefully, the single-use plastic water bottles. But maybe you can start to, you're already talking about it as a headline, but reduce the amount of single-use plastic items you have in your business. I've not got mine on, but it's not, but it could be. But you don't have. But you're doubled. It's doubled up. You could just have the tag. Okay, semantics. But yes, I absolutely. You're right. It's not single use. One thing you could potentially do is insist that retailers or tenants remove single-use plastic items from their daily functions. Anyone that's paying you rent, maybe. Work with Veolia to make it much clearer and easier to recycle. Lots of people we speak to have no idea what can and can't be recycled. We would like Southwark to pass 2 motions, and I think we've already got a piece of paper suggesting you're going to do that, to support all local plastic-free initiatives in the community, and we already know that Jasmine and Andy Simmons are going to be sitting on the board, as it were, to help us push and drive and get these solutions. We just love to help us, you to help us extend the community, plastic-free communities. We've got East Dulwich, we've got Peckham. We can't do it all on our own. We would love you to maybe make an initiative to encourage people so that need you, as it were. I can see the poster now. Over to Laura.
Sorry, the global plastic situation is one part of a much bigger threat to humankind, which is the current ecological and climate crisis that we're now living through. This crisis includes the deforestation of huge swathes of land, the pollution of our oceans, the loss of Arctic ice, which maintains the weather system of our planet, our reliance on fossil fuels, fracking, air pollution, the extinction of many species of animals and insects which form a vital part of our food chain. This council declared a climate emergency on 27th of March this year, and we would like to understand what this means in practical terms for the running of the council and its initiatives. We've got a few suggestions, some of which are underway already. So the first one is to commit to an accelerated reduction of the council's own carbon emissions, with the target to be carbon neutral by 2030, and to change all energy supplies to 100% renewable sources by 2020. Number 2, to work with partners to produce an emergency action plan, particularly with regard to flooding, which is a particular issue in Southwark, covering all the relevant council strategies, and to submit this plan via scrutiny to Cabinet by the end of September this year. Number 3, to examine all current activity across the council for potential improvements to be made. Are we using pesticides and insecticides in our green spaces, for example? Can building regulations be updated to include more radical changes to building standards? Number 4, update the new Southwark plan, which I understand has been 4 years in the writing, to account for the climate emergency that has been declared here 3 months ago, so it's probably going to need a bit of updating. And to commit to a training session for all Cabinet members to ensure that everyone here is aware of the situation that we're facing. And I have a final question. Is the Council able to provide the necessary resources for officers to deliver on the Council's carbon reduction commitments and to monitor and report annually on the borough's position? Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay, I saw Jasmine and Johnson first. Richard, you're going to respond, are you? And Leah and Kieran, and that's it. Not taking anyone else.
Me first? Okay. I just wanted to thank Laura and Giles for all their hard work, really. I mean, I've seen you in action, and obviously I've had the privilege to work with you around Benedict schools and all the neighbouring schools. I mean, basically, you spoke about, you know, how the Cabinet can help and how the Council can help. I mean, one of the things that I could bring, obviously my connections to everyone around the table, but also my portfolio with schools, really, because I think it's been absolutely stunning to see the way that parents, school children are talking to local businesses, and, you know, like having parties with some of the children that you've spoken to. I mean, they would not touch anything that was wrapped up in plastic. And it just feels like it's intuitive to them, you know, so you've done a really good job. And it's about how we can harness that, you know, to build on the back of, I think, air quality, there's a lot of that. I mean, the hard work that Richard and Councillor Mills and people around the table have already done on air quality means that we can kind of piggyback on that in the schools. You know, we've got a vehicle. So, you know, I'm very much looking forward to working with you. I mean, I just wanted to say, on the training course, I mean, I'm not sure if that's absolutely necessary because I had one lunch with Laura and I came away and I read David Wallace-Wells' book on the uninhabitable Earth, and I think most of us have read that now, so I think we could probably skip that recommendation, but very keen to work with you.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I probably echo a number of colleagues when I say I found that the petition very informative and actually very helpful in terms of getting a clearer picture into the challenges, not just that Southwark faces, but right across the world, in fact. Wanted to update you and assure you in respect to the new Southwark plan. I know it's a little long in the making, but you know, we recently published our amendments to the new Southwark plan, and it came just before we announced the climate emergency. But what we've said with the new Southwark plan is that we will constantly review it, and there are already examples of how we're exploring how we can go further. So we're saying on new developments on Oak Kent Road, how can we install more water fountains? How can we explore that? And we're saying how can we update our building regulations to go even further as well. So you know, we are fast approaching examination in public with the new Southwark plan, but it's not the finale in terms of the plan. Then we'll continue to review it and strengthen it in light of our climate emergency that we've announced. I just wanted to ask, in reflection on the point that you made in terms of the poster, and you can almost picture it, because you know much of what you've talked about will mean interventions from local authorities, national government, and regional authorities as well. But much of it also requires behavioural change.
Yes.
I just wanted to explore a little bit further if you have any examples, whether locally, right across the country, or indeed across the world, where there's been a campaign or some sort of intervention which has addressed that behavioural change.
As a micro detail, the Ivydale Primary School, Year 5, when we went to see them 4 weeks ago, the Year 5 children, the school had just employed a new catering company. The catering company rocks up with desserts in single-use plastic tubs. The children wrote to the catering company within 2 weeks. It was out. So that's just an influence that the children can have, and it's incredible. And I think it'd be really good if somehow Southwark could influence and describe more clearly and in a better frame what we can do as community members, but how Southwark can help us do that. As I mentioned, Veolia, and the unclarity, if that's a word, around recycling. Okay, we all get that A4 piece of paper in every year saying, okay, your bin is going to be collected on Wednesday. It says you can recycle bottles. What's the detail, please? People still don't know. The stat is there's less than 20% of plastic bottles that get manufactured go to recycling, because either they just end up in a bin that isn't going to recycle, just goes to landfill, or it's contaminated recyclable waste because it's got a label on, or it's half full of water, whatever it might be. There needs to be a bigger advisory role from Southwark and Veolia, not just Southwark, but Veolia need to work with you guys, and you need to work with them to, what's that clearer picture? That's one poster. What are the 5 things we can do to recycle better? That's one poster. That's another poster.
Well, we can't design every poster. But Leo, you're going to have an attempt at another poster. Or you got a question? I have a question.
This is amazing, and it's so heartening to see school children in particular becoming such amazing, effective activists. It fills me with hope for the future. So it's really encouraging, and thank you for all the work. I just wanted to ask if you would be able to advise me and my ward colleague Leanne Werner on setting up a plastic-free Bermondsey afterwards, because there is significant interest from a group of people there. We've also been talking to the local business improvement district, who have strong networks to all of the local businesses to potentially start pushing this through that route. I don't know if there's a wider application to be pursued there, but just wanted to flag that as well. There is the rumblings of another group as well already.
And actually, and this sort of combines with your question, Johnson, about sort of examples of best practice. So across the 510 communities across the UK, there are examples where whole high streets have gone plastic free entirely. In Cornwall, and so there are definitely examples of best practice that we can kind of, we can use that as a resource and build on that and hopefully get something a bit more.
Just to build on that point, Leon, we have now increasingly strong networks of businesses across the borough, and I'd be very happy to look with you at how we could get the message out to all of those networks, whether that be the emails that go out to all businesses or the targeted work with businesses in particular areas for the conversation. So welcome.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, and Richard to...
thank you first of all for coming along, and I think I'm probably speaking for all of us to see it's great to have such an energised, enthusiastic group that wants to work with us on what's a joint aim of reducing the amount of plastic there is used in our borough. So, I mean, it's just really brilliant, I think, how you've engaged with us and worked with us so far. And we're fully signed up to reducing, reusing and recycling and making sure we can achieve that. And as you said, hopefully the amendment we're proposing to move to a motion which, to a report which is on a slightly different issue, but we managed to shoehorn it in on what we're doing as a council to reduce our own single-use plastic. I think it's very helpful. I mean, you talked a little bit about how we as a council could help you, but I think actually what's really important about how you can help us, because there are things that we can do as a council to wave the finger and tell people what to do, but actually to win hearts and minds. And we need community activists like you to actually do some of that as well. So how we work in partnership, I think, is going to be really helpful, and obviously that's why we're nominating people to be sitting on your boards. I've got a report that's coming to my briefing later this week. I can see a couple of my officers sort of at the back of the room about what we're doing in our next stages in terms of putting a strategy together to reduce single-use plastic. So I know some of the ideas we're thinking about there is about how we have a plastic-free pledge, and also how we engage with local groups in a Southwark Sustainability Forum, as well as the fact that I think in July we're hoping for a climate emergency conference where I think we'll hopefully be addressing some of that longer list of issues you gave at the end. So it'd be really great to have you working alongside us on those things, if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yes.
Is that the paper that Stuart's working on at the moment?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I think we're going to be looped in on it next week.
Brilliant. Excellent. Good.
Okay.
Terrific, thank you very much indeed. Okay, I mean, we know that, yes, we know that your organisations want people nominated, because we're going to be, beneficently nominating people on. You might not want Jasmine and Andy. But you do. You do.
I think just so that
Okay, well, you're agreeing that, you know.
Peter, just to clarify, as I understand it, there's a national network that they've talked about, and there's certain criteria to have their groups fully recognised.
All right.
And doing what we're doing in the amendment later enables them to get there. So it's
Great. Great.
Right.
You're not just being polite.
No, that's great.
We need that.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to take item 8, 9 and 10, and then item 14. Okay, that's how we'll arrange the agenda. Item 8, is Barry Hargrove here? I haven't seen him. No, so this is Reducing Health Inequalities Through Council Services and Partner Organisations, report of the Healthy Community Scrutiny Commission. I mean, really, this is for us to receive this report today and agree to have a report back within 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So this is coming to, well, I don't know who it hits, I suppose, Evelyn. So yeah. Okay, so can we agree to receive the report and request a report back within 8 weeks? Okay. That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Active Southwark then, Sport and Physical Activity Strategy 2019 to 2023.
Thanks, Peter. So what we've got in front of us today is the Sport and Physical Activity Strategy, which will take us from now through to 2023. Obviously, we know that our residents are living longer, but the amount of time that they are spending in good health is also incredibly important, and we know that the gap can vary between the richest communities and our poorest communities by 19 years for both men and women, which is obviously a huge gap, and we want to make sure that we are assisting our residents as much as possible to make healthy life decisions that can enable them to live healthier lives for longer. We have obviously invested a huge amount of money over the last few years into our leisure facilities, into our parks and our green spaces, and we've obviously also introduced free swim and gym, which was one of our huge council plan commitments in the last administration, which has been extremely successful. And what we have done as part of this strategy is carried out the first part of one of our new council plan commitments around introducing free swimming lessons for all residents. What this strategy commits to is a pilot programme rolled out from September, targeting a number of key groups who we will look to roll out free swimming lessons to across the borough, and also sets out a plan to come back to Cabinet to talk about our progress on making free swim and gym more flexible as well, which we think will help increase the number of people who currently access the service. What we've done within the strategy is look at 3 themes, so active people, active places and active communities, because it's not just about getting people to do more, it's about making sure that the spaces that we have enable people to be more active in the first place. And it neatly aligns with some of the stuff within Richard's Transport and Movement Plan, which comes later on the agenda as well. So what I would ask is that Cabinet approve the strategy today so that we can go away, roll out our pilot programme for free swimming lessons, and put together an action plan so that we can start delivering on some things like the tennis strategy to make sure that we have some really good plans in place for how we'll deliver physical activity going forward.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Any comments or points to make on this? It has the great virtue of being quite a short strategy, which is what we like and think absolutely works. I mean, things like Park Run, which are incredibly popular in the borough now, seem to be growing every week. Do we have any idea of the numbers of participants in that? Do we? I mean, must have a kind of a partnership with Park Run in terms of they use our parks, but do we have any ideas of numbers on them, or? I mean, it's a completely random question that you wouldn't necessarily know the answer to, but.
I thought Burgess Park was about 500 from the numbers that I'd seen most recently.
It's very successful across all of the parks. We've also started a pilot for young park run to see how successful that is, and we'll look to sort of expand that across the borough. But it is very popular, and we work really, really well with them, and they would be a key sort of stakeholder in the strategy and the action plan going forward.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not suggesting we rewrite the strategy, but it was just a thought as I was reading it today. And we talk about reducing health inequalities, but actually we know that quite often health inequalities are intergenerational, and actually one approach to resolving that is a kind of whole family approach. But when we talk about active people, we very much break people down into individual segments. So I guess it was just a request that actually we are that there might be opportunities where 2 or 3 generations together, our approach might be more likely to break down intergenerational health inequalities.
Thanks for that feedback. I think that would be an excellent thing to weave into the action plan and look at how we could work with families and the broader family to get more people more active more often. So thank you for that.
I think as well, Vicky, it's something that we should be looking at when we talk about how we make free swimming gym more flexible, and how it's not just about certain groups going swimming or accessing our gym services, but we've been looking at some new innovative ways to make things flexible, and if we can talk about it on an intergenerational basis, that would be really good.
Just wanted to mention with the free swimming lessons, we're looking at family water confidence sessions as part of that, so I think that would also help.
I think it would be remiss of me not to raise this. Many of us were at a meeting last week where young people raised the issue of free gym only being available at certain times. And whilst I appreciate it's very unlikely that gym is going to be free Monday to Sunday, 24 hours a day, I think I'd be very interested in us exploring for young people what more could we do on the free gym offer. And I think having heard that from young people, it would be remiss of me not to raise that today.
Well, we're going to come back in 6 months with our plan, and that will have the detail of the flexible free swimming gym, which can address that.
So you stole one of my points, Vicky, because we're at the same meeting. Thank you very much. But I just want to say, this is a brilliant strategy. I mean, we've just finalised the public health annual report, and one of the issues that was raised was about isolations for young people, and we know that physical activity is one thing that can help relieve that isolation. So I really welcome this. I just wanted to find out how much have you done it at this point, or whether you plan to do so in the future. How do you engage with young people with regards to the kind of proposals that were coming forward?
I think sort of the key area was work with consultation with those groups that work with young people. But I think it's quite an interesting point that you raise in terms of, especially on the feedback you've given in making free swim gym more flexible and the strategy action plan going forward. Perhaps talking to the young advisors, connecting with them, and making young people sort of part of the thread of the action plan. So thank you very much. That's useful feedback.
And just to add to that, without hoping to preempt something that we might want to announce at some other point, obviously, even though I've been talking about doing a kind of a big youth event later in the year, I think we should probably use that as one of the ways to engage young people, to talk about what it is they want from physical activity in leisure centres and leisure services across the borough as well.
To welcome all of this, I think one thing I'd commented to you about before is about play, and I know play, I might not have specified all the references, but it's referenced here in parks particularly. But I suppose it just strikes me, encouraging play is something that happens at home, at school, in streets. So I would hope the action plan thinks about promoting play everywhere, not just in parks. And the whole, the kind of fundamentals in there that are about building those developmental skills that allow children to play actively, which is something our children's centres help with. So just thinking in the round, what are the most effective things we can do to promote structured and unstructured play in the borough in general?
I think that is something we need to explore further and look at as part of the action plan. I was going to say that we do reference the investment in venture playgrounds as well, and that's obviously really important, risky play and children being able to play independently with some supervision. So I think that's a really exciting thing that we've got that going on as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, fine, John.
Yes, just on the point of children with special needs, I just wondered if we could have some more flexibility really within the use of pools and free swim gym, because sometimes, depending on the need of the child, by the time you've actually got into your bathing costume, the session's nearly finished. So, that's been raised a couple of times. So if you could look into that, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well,
There are two recommendations for us to agree on page 36. Can we agree those recommendations, please, colleagues? And then there's an additional recommendation for me to delegate to Rebecca as Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure, Equalities and Communities for approval, detail on the pilot scheme, which I do. Okay. Terrific. Let's carry on. We've got item 10, Styles House and Southwark Underground Station, enabling principles to facilitate new council homes and new employment space. Over to Leo. We've obviously had quite a conversation about this with residents, and we've talked about perhaps an additional recommendation. It's worth noting we can't agree the final recommendations in open session. We have to go into closed session to finally sign off this report, but over to you to introduce it.
Thank you, Peter. I won't go over everything that we've already just heard, because I think the general scenario that the report is trying to respond to is quite well understood. This is, in brief, a paper that ratifies the land swap between ourselves and TfL to enable a new significant office block on the corner of the Southwark Tube above the side of the station, and crucially to enable the delivery of new council homes in a resident-led, TMO-centred way, as described. I just want to put on record as well my enormous thanks to Patrick and to Dan Taylor, who's not here, who have put a huge amount of work into making the negotiation with TfL work successfully, and also to Adele, who may be here still or not. She is, who's also been really great collaborator in trying to get this report to where it is and build that confidence with the TMO. But beyond that, the report is as on paper, and I would suggest that we tweak recommendation number 1, which describes the undertakings set out for Styles House, to include just that reference to it being a TMO-led development. That's one right there.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, as I said, we can't sign up for recommendations in closed session. Any comments or questions or queries on this? Okay, Kieran?
I mean, I think in the main thrust of it, it's really helpful to have the comments from the deputation, and I think we're responding to them. I just wanted to pick up on another separate point. So I've just come from a really positive workshop that we've just run with Living Wage Foundation about living wage zones and the various levels of that, including living wage buildings. And I just wondered if we could very actively consider in this, given who the tenant is and the builders are, the GLA and TfL, whether they would make this building, their building, a living wage building.
Should know.
Of course. We don't know who the tenant will be yet. We've got an inkling. But I don't see any reason why we can't do that. I think it's a useful use, a good use of our kind of leverage as a landowner here.
Okay, Vicky?
I just wanted to check a couple of things. The land swap only goes ahead if planning for both sites is agreed. So there's no risk that we get one development without the other. Effectively, there's going to have to be 2 developments if the land swap is going to happen. And then I'm presuming G is in the open. The sum of money that TfL on reasonable design and planning fees, that's in the open report as well as the. Yeah, that's in the open report, isn't it? I guess I'm just, the residents raised the issue of a veto, but obviously there is a relatively tight time frame there if TfL are going to pay the council that sum of money. So, you know, I'm really keen that this is a resident-led scheme, but I am really keen that if we are going to do this, we get there by the 31st of March 2020. Otherwise, we risk losing a sizable amount of money. So just a comment really on that.
You have thoughts on this, I have thoughts on this. I think they're the same. I mean, that's there because TfO would never agree to that without it. And I think it's a reasonable time frame. I don't think it's going to be a particular, you know, there'll be, I know there's disagreement among certain parts of the TMO and the residents at Styles House, but I think it's a more than reasonable time frame to start some design work. They've already got a reasonably clear idea about what kind of massing and layout they want to kind of pursue. So I think between now and then, you've got brilliant community-led design architects in Bell Phillips who've got fantastic experience of getting these things over the line. So there is a degree of risk in all of this. This is not a risk-free cabinet report at all, but I think that's a reasonable timeframe to aim at.
But in terms of the land swap that we are agreeing today, the land swap will not go ahead unless both schemes get planning permission. So we agree in principle today, but it only happens subject to 2 planning permissions.
That's correct. Recommendation 5 says it's contingent on one can only happen provided the other happens.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Dee. We'll move on to the next item, which thank you very much, Dee Patrick. We'll come back to you in closed session. Item 14, removal of single-use plastic from operational estate. Again, we've touched on this. Steph.
Thank you, Peter. And I'd like to say thank you to Plastic Free Peckham for coming along with your deputation, which was fascinating, actually. I mean, hear about an island the size of Texas is very, very worrying, isn't it? And so absolutely fundamentally says we do need to do something around that. So as we've heard that we declared a climate emergency at the last Council Assembly, and we do have a manifesto promise to actually end single-use plastic in the Council itself. And I really do believe that if we're asking businesses and other organisations to cut down on their use of single-use plastic, we have to be exemplar on that and actually lead the way. So it actually makes fundamental sense. So what this report is doing, it's setting out that strategy around how we are actually going to end up being a council that has no single-use plastic in any of our buildings. And we do have quite a lot of buildings. We have over 200 buildings, which range from the size of Tooley Street to Cleaners Mess Halls. So it's not just our main buildings, it's across the whole of the operational estate on there. So what this report does, it sets out that strategy, what those key timeframes are and how we're going to do that. And the aim is that we're going to focus on our larger sites, Tooley Street, Queen's Road, Bournemouth Road, first of all, because they're probably the ones where we can have that, we can do it quicker around that. And the aim is to be plastic free by the end of this year on those ones. The medium-sized buildings by June 2020, and then our smaller, hopefully all of our operational estate will be plastic-free by 2021. In terms of the strategy and what involves, the approach we have is, first of all, we need to identify the use of single-use plastics. What do we use? Where do we use it? Why do we use it? Around that. So we have to identify all of those, where it's being used, first of all. Then we're going to have to assess the impact on that. What is the impact on that? And assess alternatives, because actually at the moment, for some of the things that we use or are using our buildings, there are no alternatives. And so we have to say, what are those alternatives? And if there are no alternatives, do we need to stop using it? Do we accept there's no alternative until maybe products come onto the market as well? So we need to make sure, but we also need to make sure solutions are viable around that. Then we're looking at those recommendations. So once we've done that assessment, we'll look at those recommendations of what we're going to use and what that procurement's going to look like. And I know that when we're looking at our new Prepare Futures procurement strategy, that we need to bear that in mind as well, which will be coming to Cabinet at a later date. And then implement those alternatives. So it is a large piece of work because there's a lot of buildings, there's a lot of things that we use that are single-use plastic across the piece. So it's very much at the moment, we have done some, we've made some inroads around things in terms of those easy things like cups, like the cafe not selling any, now just selling glass bottles rather than plastic bottles for drinks. All of those sorts of things we've started to do, but there's a long way to go on this. So what I'm asking today is the Cabinet approves that strategy and that we work for it. Around that, and actually we delegate that implementation of the plan down to Michael as Strategic Director to make sure that plan's implemented.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, any comments on this? Other than the amendment? Other than the amendment?
Yeah.
You got the amendment. Do you want to propose the amendment then?
I'm happy to propose the amendment, Chair, just so that people in the audience know it is, that people around the table have a copy of this. Is to add 2 new recommendations, the first of which is that Cabinet notes the Fairer Future commitment to halving single-use plastic across the borough, and that a strategy to achieve this is currently being developed. Cabinet recognises the vital role of community groups in achieving this aim, and therefore agrees that the Council pledges to support all plastic-free initiatives in the community. And the second new recommendation is that Cabinet agrees to have relevant members on the Plastic-Free Community Steering Committees. Cabinet nominates Councillor Andy Simmons as representative for Plastic-Free East Dulwich, and Councillor Jasmine Ali as representative for Plastic Free Peckham, and those people and names have been agreed with both those individuals and with those groups beforehand, so we're not imposing people.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Richard. Okay, well, there are 4 recommendations therefore for us to. Yeah.
I'll formally second the motion.
Thank you, sir. There are 4 recommendations therefore before us. Can we agree those, please? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Okay, we go back to item 11, Gateway 1, nursing care, and I'll look to Jasmine to introduce this.
Okay, I'm very pleased to bring to you the report today on nursing care. This paper outlines a procurement strategy to bring to life the council plan commitment to open 2 good quality nursing homes in Southwark. And I welcome Jeanette, our Commissioner, who's just joined us now. This move, we hope, is going to raise the bar in nursing home provision. The facilities will be beautifully built, enjoyable, comfortable, with a range of social activities both in the home and surrounding communities. And we want, in short, we want to use this opportunity to really raise the bar. We want to embrace new technology in the care of people with very different needs, including people with different degrees of dementia. And Leader, I just wanted to give a nod to people in the audience, our experts in the audience, which is Esme and Jenny, who have had, well, we hope, during the process of this procurement, that they will continue to work closely with us and, look at, help us to unfold this procurement. I did want to say that the recent ADAS peer review in Southwark, which was very positive, actually praised this move, because although we've got a movement to have, supported housing in the borough, support people at home, a lot of other boroughs, mention their names, but they said this, that they had been using that as an excuse to actually stop provision of nursing homes. So they were very impressed with this move. Now, currently, 70% of Southwark people requiring nursing beds are placed out of borough. And in 2017-18, 80% of people that were placed out of borough said that they would prefer to be in borough. And we have, at the moment, looking at the numbers, we will see in the report, but we've got 212 places now, and by 220 we hope to have 260, and that will be bringing a home on in Burgess Park, and 340 by 2022, which will be looking at Dainsford Road. So that's on the numbers. We've done some good market testing in this area. Well, I should say Jeanette and her team have done some brilliant market testing, and we've been looking and speaking to good quality providers. Myself and my predecessor, Councillor Livingstone, have been and had a look at some of these providers, and we've been literally blown away, really. And I think I'm quite enthusiastic. We've got people, we've got critical friends like Esme and Jenny, we've got, great procurement team. And I think, look, you just look around anywhere in Southwark and you see the schools, you see the buildings, the leisure centres, everything that Councillor, Situ is doing. And why shouldn't we be raising the bar, for some of our most vulnerable residents? So I'll leave it there and hand over to my expert, Officer Jeanette Laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jasmine. Do you know anything to add? I mean, this is, obviously, I think we've agreed, haven't we, the physical structures of these buildings in the past, and this is the operators that we're now looking to appoint. And what's the market look like in terms of reliable operators?
So the market is very variable. And the 2 providers that are looking to develop the new nursing homes in the borough are both compared very favourably with the national average in terms of having homes in their portfolios that are rated good or outstanding. So the national average is that there are about 80% of homes that are rated good or outstanding. Both the providers who are developing homes are above that. Indeed, one of the providers has 2 homes that are rated outstanding. So it's really important that we identify providers who have a good track record in terms of delivering good care. So good buildings are important, but the care inside the homes are more important.
Thanks, Janet. Okay, questions?
So both of those homes are actually in my ward as well, and I suppose I just had a question about what we think the likely timescales for their development are. I think locally residents really want to see that got on with because they've left kind of holes in the middle of the ward, and actually there's also quite exciting plans to link them with local schools and other things locally, and so I'd be interested to hear that.
So at Picton Road, they are in the process of seeking full planning permission, and indeed are very close to receiving, we hope, a positive decision. In fact, hopefully by early next month, early May. In terms of Danesford Road, we are at outline planning permission, and once the property discussions are finalised, we would hope that the full planning permission would be put through quite quickly. Returning back to Picton Road, the provider is really keen to get on site, and in fact is already out to tender looking for a partner in terms of the construction of the site, and they are doing that at their own risk without having the decision. So I think it's really encouraging that I'm quite confident that we will have a new nursing home in Picton Road by 2020, subject to the planning permission being made in a timely way.
Yeah, I mean, as Jasmine indicates, I'm really looking forward to having the new Picton Street site, the Country Court Care. When I went to see their place in Milton Keynes, I thought this looked more like a decent hotel than a nursing home to me, and it was that good quality. So I think that shows a real improvement in the quality provision here. Just wanted to check understand the numbers in the table 2 of paragraph 17. Because given that is such a great place, it talks about having 93 residents, but there's an asterisk which says there's only 48 beds on site. So I'm probably being slightly deaf, so not understanding what that means, but just to clarify what that means. Does that mean that there's 93 overall Country Court Care, but some of them are elsewhere, or does it mean something slightly different?
So there will be a mix of care. Oh, you've got it. That's right.
Sorry, that's great. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Any other
Questions? Brilliant. Otherwise, let's. There are 4 recommendations on page 82 to take this procurement forward. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you. We move on to item 12, which is another gateway one, procurement strategy approved for parking and traffic enforcement and associated services. And this is going to be you, Richard, I'd thought.
Thank you, Chair. We are reaching the end of our contract with ATCO in terms of parking and enforcement services, and we need to prepare for that contract coming to an end at the end of March next year. We discussed in February what our strategic approach should be to re-providing that service, and we agreed that we were going to take some elements that we thought we could easily manage in-house, and that includes things like particularly dealing with parking appeals and other issues, which is sort of very desk-based. We realised at the February meeting there were some big challenges though about having some of the enforcement activities in-house, because the nature of it means there's variable levels of labour that's needed at various times, and therefore you needed a bigger pool of capacity and staff to be able to manage that. So this report is talking about how we go forward in terms of procuring that work. You will see in there the timescales set out, so it'll enable us to make a decision by January next year, so that we can then start the contract at the beginning of April 2020. One of the changes since the February report, as you'll see at paragraph 71, we've added a new condition about making sure there's trade union recognition as part and parcel of these contracts. So again, we're trying to look after the workforce there and making sure they have proper representation under the new contract.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments or queries on this? Excellent. Okay. So there are two recommendations on page 97. Can we agree those recommendations, please? Excellent. Excellent. There we are. That's the kind of report you want, isn't it? Yeah. By the time Gateway 2 will really do it, I think I've lost the question. Make your visit worthwhile, Okay. We move on to page 113, the review of the Council's approach to community engagement. That's going to be Rebecca.
Thank you, Peter. So one of the things that really quite often gets raised with me is that the Council doesn't do consultation in the best possible way that it could do. We often go out and consult and we don't feed back to people on why things have changed, or we don't do consultation in the right way. So what we have tried to do here is to set out a high-level vision and an approach that means that the Council can hold itself to account for the way in which we do consultation and engagement with all of our residents going forward. As we'll come on to later in the agenda, Johnson's obviously going to set out our consultation charter with developers, and there is no reason why we as a council therefore shouldn't be holding ourselves to the highest levels of account as well in the way that we consult and engage. So over the past few months we have gone out and co-designed this vision and our principles with the community, setting out kind of a really high level idea of what we think consultation and engagement should look like. And it's very much about a really inclusive approach to the way that we do that going forward. So what we've got here is a number of specific ways in which we will look to do consultation at a high level, and then what we want to be able to do is come back and give an idea of what this actually looks like for it to be rolled out across the whole of the council. Obviously, whilst I'm hopeful that we will approve this today, it's not going to be tomorrow that suddenly every piece of consultation and engagement we do adheres to all of these principles, but there will be a big piece of work for us to do internally with every single department across the council to get them to buy in and understand why it is that we're doing this, and hopefully over the coming months we'll be able to get every department aligned so that they are reflecting our principles within all of the consultation and engagement that they do.
Thanks, Rebecca. Leo.
Thanks, Leader. I just want to really cheer this report on because it's enormously important for the progress of the New Homes programme, and we have already been, I just wanted to note that as this report has been put together, it has already been feeding into how we have been reviewing and refreshing the consultation engagement approach for new schemes as they're coming online, but also how we're restructuring the New Homes team in terms of the role of community engagement officers there, and the kind of remit that's been given to the new director who's been appointed recently. So I just wanted to really acknowledge that. It's an enormously useful report, and I can't wait to see us embed these principles fully in my bit of my portfolio.
I also just want to really welcome this. I think this is absolutely where we should be. I think importantly we should also acknowledge, I've got some experience of projects that have absolutely lived up to these values that the council's delivered, but this is about making it the norm across everything we do. I guess one question is just, do we have in mind some specific projects that we'll be making sure this is done with to start with, to kind of show how it's done?
I don't think we do specifically. I think we want to make sure that we are working with the kind of senior leadership team within the council and getting them bought into this vision, and then being able to filter it down through every department, so that we're not saying this department can do it first and this department can do it second. We want the whole council to be doing the approach concurrently so that we can roll it out as quickly as possible.
You're coming back, or we're coming back in September, which is great. Broadly really supportive of this. I suppose at the end of the appendix we talk about being simple and accessible and about being clear. And I'm really keen that the officers who have to deliver this consultation, but also the residents who are getting involved in consultations, that this is as accessible as possible, because sometimes 2 pages is too much for people. So I guess as part of what we're going to do over the next kind of 4 or 5 months, how can we kind of drill this down into some really kind of simple and coherent kind of ideas or visions that people can access really easily.
And I think that's about principles. So I think that's about promoting the principal part. I think the rest of it is kind of more for internal use, and also reassurance with the community and voluntary sector that we were working with in building that common point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a really good and really thorough plan. I suppose the thing I'd like to see when it comes back in September probably is how we're going to measure the success of it, what those outcomes are, and where it's worked really well, and maybe the learning from it, and how, because I'm assuming this will be an adaptable sort of consultation, not just set in stone, this is how you do it, that we learn through trial and error as it goes on, yeah?
Yes, definitely. I think one of the things we need to look at is obviously every department does consultation engagement slightly differently, and actually part of it will probably be about standardising where we can, but also accepting that there are some departments, Leo's for example, where there is much more consultation and much bigger consultation than might go on in other departments, and it's about reflecting the different size and scale of consultation and engagement and what is appropriate for each of those, because we don't want to create an overburdensome set of principles that mean people can't actually deliver on them in the first place.
Diversity features as an important factor, obviously, in here, and this will be presenting an opportunity for the refresh of the diversity standard, I'm guessing, in kind of how we make that real. And the other point I was going to make is that we have talked about citizens panels or whatever, online panels, in other fora, but I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it, to see how we embed that as well as we go about the delivery of this, so looking beyond the September deadline.
Yes, definitely, in terms of kind of citizens panel, how we can get people involved and engaged in other ways. On the diversity standard, what we've talked about is having kind of a series of things, so our equality standard, our diversity standard, and the principles all sitting alongside each other. So what we'll do is we will complete the work on this alongside starting the work on the diversity standard review and our equality standard, which means we can have a whole kind of suite of principles and approaches that the council takes.
Okay. With that, there are 4 recommendations, page 130 to 114, and I'm kind of this is setting the work off again a bit, isn't it? So, can we agree those recommendations and look forward to the report in the autumn? Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Okay. Neatly, we move into the development consultation charter. It's almost like it's planned. Yeah.
It is. I'll give a second for Simon to get settled. You know, as Councillor Lurie said, I very much think that this report is very much a follow-on from previous report, and you know, if I'd be so humble to say, very much a reflection of the team. But I think it's a massive game changer in respect of how we look at consultation, both these reports. You know, Southwark is a vibrant place to live. We've seen record levels of employment, we've seen new homes being delivered, we've seen new libraries, all the things that, you know, we've all seen and we've all talked about up and down the borough and many and numerous cabinet meetings. But as we know as councillors and ward councillors, and certainly if you speak to colleagues right across London, it's not just an issue for Southwark. We see some examples where consultation works well, but then we see some examples where consultation could be better. And essentially, when we think about this report, the key question is why are we delivering on it and why are we developing it? And it's to create a Southwark standard and to ensure there isn't that lottery of, depending where you live, the standard of consultation you get, and depending on where you live, or depending on what scheme, or depending on who's delivering that scheme, is the quality of consultation that you get. So we're absolutely clear, and this follows on from the work we've done in respect to the Southwark conversation, where we spoke to over 3,000 residents, our most wide-ranging conversation right across the borough. And one thing that came out of that conversation, a number of things came out, but one thing that was loud and clear is it was important to have that standard of consultation. It was important to have that universal standard right across the borough as well. And indeed, actually speaking to colleagues right across London, it's fair to say Southwark is leading from the front on this, and certainly I can't see any other example of any other London borough developing such a charter. So we'd like to thank all the team. I know Juliet's not here, but if she's watching, would like to thank her as well. But just briefly run through the charter. It recognises that it is a charge to the development world, but it's also a charge to us. So we're deliberately calling it the Development Consultation Charter as opposed to the Developer Consultation Charter. It recognises that depending on the scheme will depend on the level of consultation. quite recognising that the bigger schemes, the strategic schemes such as schemes, I don't want to pinpoint specific examples, but say, for example, in north of the borough where there's been a scheme that looks to offer a number of homes, you would expect a certain level of consultation, whereas smaller schemes, whereas a certain level, it recognises that there will be a criteria there as well. It also recognises that depending on the size of scheme in terms of commercial sense, will also depend on the level of consultation as well. Crucially, it recognises that it's pointless to produce this consultation charter if it doesn't relate to planning. And it's particularly poignant that the chair of planning has just come into the room as well, which is really important to recognise that how do we ensure that schemes go into planning have been through this process and will be linking to the validation process as well. So we have a number of recommendations. We are saying we're going out to consultation between now and September 2019, working with local communities right across the borough to hear their thoughts. And of course, local communities have been part of the process in developing this consultation charter. Really looking forward to the next few months in terms of developing and speaking to communities in a workshop format as well. But beyond that, also really looking forward to linking this to our validation and our planning process to ensure that people are seeing this being delivered right across the borough.
Excellent. Okay, Vicky, Rebecca, Steph, Leo, Evelyn.
I wanted to firstly welcome Appendix A, because I do think that's really clear and it talks people through step by step, and I think that's really helpful. But I just wanted to query the recommendations and the timetable as set out in paragraph 28. We're agreeing the draft charter for consultation. That's perfect and great, and of course we want to agree that. And then we're saying we agree the draft development consultation charter will be used in the validation of planning applications. I just want to clarify that you're asking that we agree that the current draft is what will be used from today going forward, and then presumably based on the timetable in 28, we will have a final charter for agreement by cabinet at some point in the autumn, and obviously if there are changes that will then become the development charter. But you're saying that between now and a final charter, the draft charter is effectively the charter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. This is really great, and I think it's really important that we have something like this so that we can make sure the consultation is being done in the right way. As Simon and Jess, you'll know, something that I've been going on about for a while is around kind of how we get that very initial stage of engaging the community and bringing them along on the journey with us from the very beginning, and the work that we did when we were looking at the Walworth Town Hall and the kind of pre-engagement that we did. Obviously that was a site that we have a significant stake in and know that it is coming forward for planning, which isn't always the case with developments that come forward in the borough. But I presume that's what fits into this kind of pre-planning stage that you've got on page 169, with the idea that actually really early engagement with the community and getting them to help shape the views and an understanding of why the development is happening in the first place is kind of what that stage is. And that's really important in us being able to get that buy-in from the community to be able to take forward some of the development that we want to do across the borough.
Yes, I think what you're saying, Councillor, is that that refers to the fact that Southwark is a very proactive borough with a lot of regeneration programmes, so we're not waiting for developers to come and do things to us. We've got quite clear plans for the borough. We've brought forward an area action plan for the Old King Road, which follows on from area action plans and other frameworks that we've prepared for our regeneration areas. And the development charter also talks to the whole process of how people are engaged through the regeneration. So we're working with the whole, not just planning, it's regeneration, to bring people in and understand how they can influence changes in their neighbourhoods.
And I guess that also extends to then developers who we partner with to take things forward. So if you think of the town hall and general projects and the work that they did, before any kind of decision was made, we asked both them and Castle to go out and to speak to the community and get a good understanding of what was going on and get their initial thoughts on which project to take forward.
Absolutely.
You did that some without opening
We're one.
Yeah, I also work with this. I'm noticing in my ward, where that part of the ward which sits in between two area action plans, the County Wards and the Old Kent Road one, that there are more opportunities coming up for development around this. So this is a really, really good piece of work. I suppose the question I want to ask is, have you had any kickback or feedback from developers yet, knowing that this is coming in around that? And if so, what had their initial thoughts or sort of, comments been around this?
Briefly, no sort of real resistance to it. A lot of developers are interested in engaging with the local communities to different levels, and we're just really pushing them to raise it to a high level that meets our expectations. I dare say at certain stages in the future, when we're pressing this as a validation requirement for planning applications, there will be people who question it and will say, why can't I just go ahead and stick an application in for 500 new homes in this area without talking to anybody first, but we will put them right.
I'm going to put it better myself. I just to add to that point, an absolute agreement. Like all businesses, having a level of clarity is always important. So being absolutely clear as to what the expectation is, certainly anecdotally, it has proved helpful for developers in the conversations I've had, trying to work out what it is. And then secondly, it also provides clarity for local residents, and it empowers local residents because they're absolutely clear as to what they should expect in terms of development. So if there is ever a win-win, I think this is a win-win in terms of providing clarity for both sides.
Okay, Leo, is this consistent with what we want to do as a council?
Absolutely. Well, I like to think that what we do as a developer goes further than this, even. No, absolutely. I applaud and salute this and acknowledge the sterling work of Council City in putting all of this together. I just wanted to also note the central importance of this to the social regeneration approach that we have. That is fundamentally about making sure that development and change in the borough is doing the job of reducing health, housing and economic inequalities, ensuring that the strategies and plans of the council and of developers are properly meeting the needs and initiatives of the community, that top down and bottom up is properly connected. And I think at the heart of that is listening, it's place listening. And this really embeds it in a way that is really, really gratifying to see, and it's so satisfying that we're in a council that is leading the way on how to do this. My question around how this has been communicated to developers, I think it's been covered, so I'll leave it at that.
Great, I think this is really important because this is needed to be able to bring residents along with us as we go through the regeneration of our borough. My question is on numbers, and apologies if I've missed this, but so in a situation where I could talk for Old Kent Road, whereby some developers have done due diligence with consultation, but just managed to get 3 people through the door, or managed to speak to minimal people. Are we thinking about how we put some kind of quota on, what is required?
Yeah, so that question, I guess, boils down to 2 points. Firstly, it's partly to be absolutely clear as to the engagement plans, because often the style of engagement is not necessarily going to capture the most amount of people. And what we've said in this consultation charter is that we would expect engagement plan to be circulated to ward councillors. And of course, ward councillors will be in a really good position to be able to say, well, an exhibition in a drafty room in the middle of the afternoon is not going to attract anybody. How can you differ this? Well, half a mile away, how can you differ this? So being absolutely clear in terms of the engagement plan will be an important way in addressing that. And then secondly, we're also saying, we're also offering the opportunity, multiple opportunities to check in terms of offering those exhibitions. Often it's just the once or the twice, but particularly on the bigger schemes, if you're offering multiple opportunities to have that exhibition, then you can still see the numbers and still have that meaningful engagement.
Okay. No other questions?
Or comments? So we've just got two recommendations here for approval to take this forward from today, which are on page 158 through to 159. Can we agree those, please? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Okay, adoption of the council's movement plan is award-winning, Richard.
Yes. Well, the plan's not yet award-winning because we haven't yet agreed it. However, we are the Transport Authority of the Year at Southwark, so I think that's worth noting. Of the years that's just gone past, we are the latest recipients of that award, the 2019 award. So, however, we are not a borough that ever rests on its laurels, and I think the fact that we are the Transport Authority of the Year means that we have to set our aim very high so that we can really exemplar for other authorities to go forward. And we hope the movement plan, which we're also subtitling, just so that people are clear what it means, setting a direction for transport, is there. But the reason we are calling it a movement plan is very clearly because we want to get away from the idea that actually movement is just about getting from A to B, but we want to make very sure that our transport plan is looking at some of the broader issues around this. We're a borough that has grown hugely in population. If you look at Denmark Hills Station, for example, which was once a fairly tiddly suburban station, it now has more passengers through it each year than any of the Birmingham stations, for example. It's just absolutely astronomical, the growth in numbers there, and that is true of many of the stations in Southwark. And with all these extra people, we can't have everybody zooming around the borough in cars. We know that not only creates transport issues, but it also has big health implications, not only for those people that are experiencing the externality of pollution, but also in terms of people's own physical well-being as well. So our plan is very much about trying to look at a more holistic approach, having more of a public health-centred approach on how we go forward. We've got three very broad themes around people, place and experience. We have the 9 missions set out there as well and 23 actions. You'll see towards the end of the report itself that we've got some very clear measures about how we're going to measure we're achieving each of those missions, which I think is really important so we can keep ourselves to task on all of it. And you'll also see that as part and parcel of this, we're also setting forward our plan for the local implementation plan. I also think what LIP3 stands for, the local implementation plan, which is a statutory requirement on the council to show how our plan works together with the GLA and Transport for London's plan, and it has the added advantage of being able to trigger funding from TfL to be able to put in place lots of improvements to our network, whether it's for cycling, walking, livable neighbourhoods, but also for on the roads as well in terms of improving road safety and tackling speed as well. So this is a great plan. I hope that we are the first of many boroughs that will agree movement plans in the future and that other people will start copying us. But I think it's a brilliant plan, and I want to thank Sally and her team for some fantastic work in getting the plan to where it's got to. We had over 1,000 responses in the consultation.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Brilliant. And I particularly like the bouncing baby graph, or is it bouncing sumo wrestler graph? Page 52. Yeah. For child excess weight. They are a bit weird, aren't they? Where did you get that little symbol from? Okay. Johnson, you had a question.
Yes.
Question.
Well, wait to hear it.
Okay.
I'm not sure so sure. I'd like to echo Councillor Livingston's comments in terms of commending all of the work that's gone into this. Anecdotally, a lot of the conversations I've had with colleagues across London recognise and celebrate the fact that we've been so holistic in terms of looking at how we view transport and how it links into public health and other key ambitions and key commitments from the council. My question was in relation to the point that Councillor Livingston was talking about in terms of TfL particularly. Now, it's evident from recent headlines that they've had to make significant decisions about routes right across London. Just wanted to seek assurances that we, and I know this is happening on a political level and on an operational level, but wanted to seek assurances that we'll be sharing this plan with them as well, so they can see the scale of our ambition and the importance to continue to invest in our borough.
Sorry. Most definitely, we've already talked to TfL about how we're approaching it. They're welcoming our approach. I think that the way that we've framed it, being people-centric, actually changes the language and way that we speak to them, and therefore some of the computerized and systemized ways that they approach things don't work with that. So I think hopefully it will set a new tone for how we engage with them.
Thank you.
I think it's a great plan. I really welcome the focus on missions, particularly within it. I was just interested in what the approach is to reporting on those to make sure we're making the progress that we're hoping to make on the missions.
Go on, you've been cut off. We're all been. And within that, yeah.
Only I
Freedom. Okay.
That's one.
Anyone? Okay. What's
Yes, so welcome the focus on missions and the measures against them. Just wondering what the process for reporting on those is, and wondering whether there should be some process for reporting back to Cabinet in the recommendations in here.
Go, Sally.
I'll answer the first one and perhaps leave the second one to Councillor Livingston. We have traditionally always produced an annual report in the form of a kind of PDF, but what we are looking to do is to produce information and publish on the website rather than a kind of formalised report. We commit to looking at our trends annually and then doing a whole 5-year review of the plan itself.
Okay, there was a sensible answer to that, which we did pick up in terms of reporting back. Okay, everyone's working again. Richard, do you want to finally wrap up on this?
Yeah. I think the reporting back's a good idea. Maybe reporting back annually would make sense. I think, given the sort of timescales that are needed for this, I think if we have an annual report back to Cabinet, maybe we add that as a third recommendation.
Okay.
When do you want to report back? 12 months?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So let's add a recommendation. So with the recommendation, there would be a report back on the implementation of the movement plan in 12 months' time. And thereafter on an annual basis. No. Okay. Can we agree those 3 recommendations then? Agreed? Great. Excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Lee. Sally, that's great. 75. Okay, former Joseph Lancaster School on land at the Lawson Estate, SE1. This is one of those really familiar items where we have to release land, then grant it back. I get it. It sits with you. But it's one of those, isn't it? It's one of those. You've summarised it perfectly already for me. This is all in aid of ensuring that we can build not 1, not 2, not 3, but 40 council homes on the site of Devil Street in Chaucer Ward. So it's very exciting. It's continuing our really strong collaboration with Leather Market JMB. I would note as well that a previous Cabinet had signed off this site for the Leather Market Community Benefit Society to develop, but we have changed that off the back of the grant conditions that were made available with the Mayor of London's house building programme, which required that it need to be an RSL that delivers it. So it's us, it's council housing, it's managed by Leather Market JMB, it is on paper. Thank you very much indeed. So this is one of those familiar, as I say, it is a familiar kind of report where we appropriate land and etc. So 4 recommendations set out on page 192 to 193. Colleagues are familiar with this, having seen it at agenda planning. Any queries or questions? Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Patrick. Finally, in open session, the impact of Brexit on Southwark, which again I think we could probably take quite briefly because it's such an uncertain world. We could speculate for hours, couldn't we? But yeah, I mean, in short, we're getting ready for elections and all is well.
Yes, very briefly then, I think the 2 recommendations, one to note the progress on work that has been undertaken by the Council, and also to convene a further meeting of the cross-party Brexit panel following the annual Council meeting and the outcome of the EU parliamentary elections. I think number 2 is really important because you know, the panel did some really good work. I think it's time for the panel to reflect on the recommendations that they made in January, which we accepted, what the progress on those recommendations are, and what further concerns they have as we head towards October. There's lots of good things in the report, even though we're talking about a deeply depressing subject. But I do think, I've tried to be brief, it is really, really important to commend the amazing work of our elections team, who in a few weeks have done the work that they would have probably had 6 months to do. They have turned that around, and I have confidence that we will have a well undertaken, efficient, effective EU parliamentary elections on the 23rd of May, and that is thanks to them. What I do want to highlight is the absolute disgrace that EU citizens have had a matter of weeks to fill in an UC1 form, which I'm not convinced is entirely needed anyway, and they usually have 4 months to do that. We have contacted all registered EU citizens, but we will not have been able to contact unregistered EU citizens. We know that in 2009, over 1 million EU citizens voted in the European elections. By 2014, that was nearer to 300,000. There is a huge, huge risk of disenfranchisement of EU citizens, and the failure to do better on that lies with the government, not with us. But as I say, you know, that being the case, I really want to commend the work the elections team have done to make sure that as many EU citizens as possible are able to vote here, should European elections go ahead on the 23rd of May.
My understanding, the challenge is now, if you've elected to vote here as an EU citizen, then, as you say, you would lose your vote if the elections do not go ahead on the 23rd of May. So, you know, which would be quite shocking disenfranchisement of EU citizens who would have the right to vote in their home country otherwise. So, there we are. Yeah, I can't see a way in which these elections don't take place, quite frankly, otherwise there would be all sorts of issues. Okay, any questions or issues arising out of this? Kieran?
One of the issues that came up from the Brexit panel was around our suspicion that the Home Office wouldn't be able to support EU citizens applying for their settled status here in an effective way, and I think we've seen that borne out with people really struggling to use the systems that the Home Office have put in place. I just wondered if there was any update on the support we've been able to offer to them locally, and if you think that's working well or not, our local support is working well or not.
So I know we wanted to be brief, so sorry I didn't draw, but in paragraph, I can't remember, we have dealt with, I think, 27% of the national total number of EU citizens who are opting to get additional support, and that's happened at our registry office in Camberwell, do we call it Peckham? Camberwell. And, you know, appointments are booked up there until May, you know, huge numbers of people going there. I'm convinced that we are doing all we can, but we're now in a situation where, of course, we're paying for a service and supporting a service that might not be needed, which is deeply frustrating when we reflect on how little money we have as a council. I think one of the things that I think the panel will need to reflect on in June or July is the fact we have not yet implemented the fund, the money that we set aside to support vulnerable groups to get their EU settled status. And I'm nervous about us going ahead with that before we know what's going to happen. But I think there's some work that it would be useful for the panel to do in June or July to think about how we do that.
Okay. Steph, quick one.
It was a
second question was just to back up what Vicky said about staff in the registry office. They've worked really, really hard and really risen to, you know, something they shouldn't really be doing, I don't think, but they've done really well, remarkably well, and the fact that we are more or less a go-to borough in London for that just reflects that.
Okay, so Stephen, I'm sure big thank you to you for carrying on the work that you've done, and other Stephen, and for holding this all together, and well done, keep up the great work during this period of uncertainty. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.